all.
I appreciate that.
Where's it going to be? The
that's very
the
helpful.
main one?
Coaches.
Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We have another fantastic episode for you guys. It's the last episode of June. We're getting into July, which means there's some good things coming down the horizon. Summertime, training camp will be here soon enough. Scott Fishbowl. There's a lot of things fun going on. So we have one more episode here in June, and we are talking about bounce back players today. Players who, whether or not they had a bad season last year, or if you expect them to do even better than what they did the year before because they had a down year in a general sense. We're going to talk about those players today. Of course, we have Coach Steve on today's show. What's going on, other Coach Steve?
Other Coach Steve.
Come up with a different name for you or something. We gotta figure something out.
I worked as a cook, and there were two Steves, and I remember that I was Steve 2 and he was Steve 3. There was no Steve 1. We just decided that we agreed, hey, it was very diplomatic. But yeah, hey man, it's late June. I think, I'm talking with my buddies in our home league, and they're saying, yeah, it's around the corner.
Yes.
So I'm like, hey, look, I know if they're in, we got to be in. So, hey, let's get it today.
Yes, the non-fantasy football maniacs are finally coming out of hibernation, which is a great time of year now. So it's a good thing. No Coach Tyler today. He's been a little MIA. Hopefully we'll be back next week, but we'll have to wait and see. But of course, we have a fantastic guest on today's show. Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros. Derek Brown, what's going on?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, it's a good time, baby. Good time to be alive. Good time to be drafting. I mean, I'm all in these best ball streets trying to swing dynasty trades. I got a few startups popping off, which nowadays, you get so freaking busy with talking about the in-season stuff that, like, I can only get into best balls nowadays, dude. Like, I can't even go do any lineup setting, things like that. It's like people will hit me up and like, hey, I got a startup popping off. And I'm like, all right, is it best ball? And they're like, no. And then I'm like, no. Like, I just can't, man. But still trying to get some startup action this year. But it's a good time, man. Still kind of processing some of the news from OTAs, things like that. But when training camp gets here, social media, all the things and stuff, ADPs, all kinds of stuff's going to be flying and popping, man.
Yeah, it's an exciting type of year, guys. This is going to be really fun. Things are going to start heating up for us. But we're here to talk about some bounce back players, comeback players, whatever you want to call it here. And so we're going to start right off the bat here with Coach Steven 2. We'll give you Coach Steven 2 vibes there with his first player off the board here. So I'm going to bring up the screen now. And we have Ramondre Stevenson, running back for the New England Patriots. All right, Coach Steve 2, what you got for us?
Man, we were just talking off air about Ramondre, and D-Bro, I was with you, man. I had all the Ramondre shares in Dynasty startups in 2021 or 2020. And then, we kind of saw the split with Damian Harris. We saw how that went. But he showed flashes his rookie year. It really looked good for us who had him early on, right? And then something interesting happened where he got everything we wanted as Ramondre Stevenson managers. He was the workhorse. He broke 1,000 yards in that 2022 season, and then he got all of the work in the passing game. And the thing that happened was it was all contextual in that if you just look at his season as a whole, you had to be in on Ramondre Stevenson because he's going to get all the work. 88 targets in that 2022 campaign. He was an RB1. Then at the end of the year, what really happened was he fumbled. He fumbled 4 times, and Damian Harris came back from injury, and Bill Belichick gave Damian Harris actually more carries in the last 2 games of the season. So you had to pay attention. I knew Bill Belichick did not like Ramondre, and we saw that because they got Ezekiel Elliott, which made no sense other than Bill Belichick actually didn't really want to lean on Ramondre as much as they did. They really had to with Mac Jones in that horrible year. So we really had a really bad year. And if you saw that coming, you kind of went away from Ramondre. Now we're back, guys. Dude just got paid. Zeke is gone. They brought in Antonio Gibson. That's it as far as like legit competition. So you have Jacoby Brissett, who might start the year. I love Stevenson being the RB1 in a Jacoby Brissett led offense. Go ahead with that. And then if they bring in Drake May, which they will sooner than later, I think they'll lean on Stevenson. That's their plan. They just told us that. So I think you buy in, you buy the dip. Sleeper ADP has him as RB22. That's his absolute floor. Well, I would say that's not absolute floor. I think maybe he does have a lower floor than that, but that really is like near the bottom of that back end RB2 for Ramondre. So just buy him at that. And it's a really good value.
Fantasy Pros has him at RB19, 68 overall right now in Fantasy Pros. Derek, how do you feel about Ramondre Stevenson? Are you also in on the comeback?
Yeah, I'm in the comeback big time. I want to make sure that I stay ahead of it. I've got him at RB17 right now, looking to see where I've got him overall right now. He said he's at 68 per consensus. Yeah, I got him at 55, man. I want to definitely make sure. Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that I stay ahead of ADP, man. And I think that we were a year early. So some behind the scenes stuff. I'm not gonna per source or news all this kind of stuff, but I do know pretty confidently that he entered camp last year. I'm not gonna say extremely overweight, but overweight. And some of that is due to offseason, the injuries that he was still recuperating from the previous season in 2022. But that is why we saw him struggle immensely to begin the season. And all of his tackle breaking metrics, like it was him and Tony Pollard last year. Like both of them just like looked like they rolled out of bed week one and forgot how to break tackles. And the him coming into the season out of shape and things like that makes a lot more sense when you especially marry the fact of like the final 4 games of last season when we saw Ramondre supposedly, you know, as close to, I guess, like back to being in shape as we could have expected in an in-season process. But like amongst 48 qualifying running backs in those final 4 games, he finally started to look like Ramondre Stevenson that we had seen previous years. He was 13th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 3rd in yards of contact per attempt. And that's one of the things with Ramondre that like ever since his rookie season, you've been able to kind of hang your hat on. He's been one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL. So it was startling to say the least, like when he came out the gate last year and he was like, oh no, holy crap, he looks like freaking Eddie Lacy 2.0. This is terrible. And then you saw those things kind of pick up, and he went into this offseason fully healthy. He looks extremely trim on every like training camp video and things like that. And the team showed faith in him and saying, no, we're going to ink you. We're going to get you and make sure that you are a integral mainstay in this offense for years to come. So it's all good things, man. I think we were a year early on the hype, and I'm drafting him a ton. Right now he's probably a top 5, top 6 exposure guy for me at the running back position in best ball.
Yeah, I like Stevenson a lot for 2024. I think what they did was they basically, instead of signing Zeke Elliott for that goal line red zone threat, now it's back to Stevenson being able to have that role in the offense there. Antonio Brown had like 13 red zone touches last year. It was like outside the top 45 among running backs here. You know, he's here as a kind of like a change of pace. Sometimes you'll get the third down work there, but which might eat into a little bit of Stevenson's work. But Stevenson's going to get that goal line work. So, you know, him having those low touchdowns last year, you know, there's a great possibility to him to kind of reach that 10 mark, especially in this offense where they're going to rely on the run consistently, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or even better when they get to Drake May. And they're not going to throw Drake May 45 times a game. They're going to use Stevenson as much as possible, which is going to be great for his season this year. So if you're looking for a running back this year, Stevenson is going to do it. And Steve, I love this pick here.
He goes in a really good range. Real quick, he goes in a good range on underdog drafts, like you were talking about, Debro, the best ball. I mean, they kind of are compartmentalizing the positions the way the ADP goes in underdog drafts right now. And there's this clump of running backs in like the middle of the draft, and he ends up being one of the better ones, but really isn't picked first of that bunch. So it's a really good value there too.
Yeah, I love that call, and I love the shout out by Steve as far as the volume and stuff like that. I mean, that's one thing I can definitively tell you. Alex Van Pelt is going to run the ever-loving shit out of the ball. So I think he's going to get all the volume, and I don't really care, and I honestly don't want him to play 80, 90% of the snaps. Like, give me guys and offenses that can play 60 to 70% of the snaps and stay healthy and effective. and have the juice like all year. I'd much rather that than give me, 80, 95% of the snaps. One, I mean, you can count on one hand how many running backs actually get that type of workload.
Yeah.
And that number, that even if the one hand that you got is like, oh, look at all these great guys. And it's like, how many of those guys are going to stay healthy the entire season, even if they get that type of workload? So, everybody's like, well, Gibson's going to eat into his work. Well, yes, he is, but not enough to where, like, I think it's going to be absolutely detrimental. And it's not like Stevenson, one of the things in his bag that we've touted for numerous seasons, it's not like he's a bad pass catcher. So this is not and people will make the loose comparison to Alex Van Pelt, like, oh, a Nick Chubb to Kareem Hunt and that type of split backfield. Could it evolve into that? Sure. You're also not giving Stevenson enough credit. He's a much better and more polished receiver and has been the entirety of his NFL career than Nick Chubb ever has been. So it's not a strict and definite one-to-one comparison.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Stevenson, like I said, he was a fantastic runner in 2022. Again, so like people just kind of got to buy back into him because there's a good season for him. And if anything, he has an injury history. So having Antonio Gibson come in and a few more stops here and there, it's just going to keep him on the field for 17 games, which in fantasy, it's all we can ask for. So, all right, Dak Brown, we're going to go over to your first player here, a running back up in Minnesota here. And it's Aaron Jones, ADP RB 18, overall 63. So talk about why Aaron Jones is on a comeback this year.
All we need to do is see him healthy. And I know there's a lot of ifs that go with that and that type of hope for an aging running back. I get it. But that's also why you're seeing him go where he goes in drafts. And everybody will say, okay, I got so burned last year by drafting him, playing him, and dealing with him being out, them being ineffective. It's like, the thing about it is Aaron Jones is still that guy when he's healthy. We saw that last year in the stretch of weeks 15 through 20. And yes, I'm going through the playoffs too, because he was healthy and he was dominating. And it's the only stretch of games, weeks 15 through 20, that we saw Aaron Jones fully healthy. And what we saw was amazing. I mean, he was averaging 21.6 touches per game, over 120 total yards amongst 47 qualifying running backs in that span. When he was healthy, he was 8th in explosive run rate and top 10 in yards after contact per attempt. So it's like any player, we can play the whole entire game, and good Lord, social media loves like, oh, he just pulled his hamstring reading this tweet, all this kind of dumb jokes. It's like, bro, how many times do you think you can use that? Or we've heard that over how many years? You'll use that all for Will Fuller. Shit wasn't funny then. It's not funny now. I mean, keep trying to play up the same tired jokes. I'm not going to pretend like I just have the injury crystal ball in front of me. What I can say is if he stays healthy, he still has the same type of juice that we've seen out of Aaron Jones in previous years, where he has been priced up a lot higher than this. And I'm sorry, everybody can miss me with all their Ty Chandler hype. There is no metrics you're going to pull for Ty Chandler. It's going to make me believe like, holy crap, he's so freaking good at football. And Minnesota saying, oh, we're going to split the backfield. Again, I'm going to go right back to, I don't give a crap if he plays 60 to 70% of the snaps.
Right.
I don't care about that. Like, you're going to shade a guy like that. Like, that's every running back pretty much nowadays in the NFL. So just tell me that you want to play 0 RB and go about your business.
I mean, the Minnesota Vikings as a whole, all of their ADP is depressed. Jefferson, even, he's going in that back of that range where he could easily be at the front of it. Jordan Addison is a great value. And that clump of running backs on underdog right now, Aaron Jones is in that just pile of running backs, right? But if you're going to say who has the biggest ceiling of all those, it's most likely Aaron Jones. And I haven't really bought a lot of Aaron Jones, but I think that you're right. The Ty Chandler hype is a little outdone, and Aaron Jones should easily, when healthy, he's going to get 60 to 70% of the workload. So I think I'm a little bit more in kind of with that justification.
I don't understand the entire Ty Chandler hype. Like, we're talking about a running back that I don't get it. Like, things that I care about, metrics that I care about, I'm looking at it right now. Amongst 49 qualifying guys, Ty Chandler was 47th in missed tackles forced per attempt. Is that really a metric you want to chase in drafts?
Definitely
And
not.
then you look at where's he at in yards of contact per attempt? Oh, look at that. Still 47.
Yeah.
So it's
He should have
like
been better with the opportunity he had last year.
he should
He should
have,
have.
and he wasn't. He had one game versus, I want to say it was the game he blew up was versus Cincinnati. And you correct me, guys, if I'm wrong here, but
We'll find
yeah,
out.
it was the game versus Cincinnati when he had 23 carries and he blew up against a bottom 5 run defense.
Yeah.
Everybody has that so cemented in their heads, and it's like,
Right.
oh well, he was good that week.
Yeah.
Every other week he kind of sucked.
And a
Like,
lot of times,
so
bro, you have to understand these same guys making the jokes about hamstrings on Twitter are the same guys that will stick with that guy until, you know, you can't, they're blue in the face, right? And Ty
Yeah.
Chandler, he's a guy that people really wanted to believe in. They saw a little bit of hope,
Mhm.
and you really have to stick with that sometimes. You know, I think that there is hope for him for sure, but you have to understand if he's the only competition, we really haven't seen him succeed in the NFL yet. Aaron Jones, when healthy, just seems like smash.
I mean, people are like, oh well, you tell me he ran for 4.5 yards per carry. It's like, I don't really care. You look at his tackle breaking metrics, all that tells me is all he got what was blocked for him. So you're telling me he runs for 4.5 yards per carry behind the Minnesota offensive line. What the hell do we think an actually good running back in the NFL is going to do this year?
That's true. And they went out and signed him this offseason. You know, like if Ty Chandler was all that good, no, why go spend $7 million on Aaron Jones, who's 30 years old this year? Like, come on. Like, there's a reason why Aaron Jones is on this list here. Again, didn't play early in his early career, so he has a couple more, maybe another year or two, at least great production for his game there. And he played 17 games 2 years ago. It's not like he can't play a full season, and he's indoors now instead of playing out in the cold in Green Bay for 8 games a year, or whatever it is. He's going to be inside, cozy, and he's going to be great.
Keep those hammies warm, baby.
Which would be a great thing.
And
there.
how, you know, I mean, even if it is McCarthy, Darnold, whatever, how often can you put in 8 in the box when you have Jefferson, Addison, when Hawkinson comes back? I mean, it's going to be really tough to guard those guys.
It is.
KOC is one of the best play callers and schemers in this entire freaking league. And anybody that's got a problem with hearing that, look at what they did with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins. I mean, they were productive, and neither one of them are good NFL quarterbacks.
Not very at all. And then also, even if the quarterbacks, you know, he's going to get the receptions out of the backfield. I mean, we saw Sam Darnold feed CMC a couple years ago. I mean, the rookie's going to dump the ball off to keep the ball out of his hands way too often whenever he gets an opportunity this year, if he does. So Aaron Jones is going to get the opportunity this year to thrive. And again, you're getting both these running backs, like, you know, in the 5th or 6th round. Like, I'll go wide receiver and a tight end first, and then get one of these guys as a potential RB1 upside play that has an opportunity to do that. So
I love that you brought that up, because the other thing that I'll marry to this is that, and I guess maybe I haven't given enough credence to his pass game upside in that offense, because I am so out on Jordan Addison. All of his numbers just scream fraud last year, and so it's like, okay, well, Hawkinson's going to miss a lot of time this year. We don't even know when he's coming back, much less coming back to play a high snap role. I'm out on Jordan Addison. Who the hell else in this offense behind Justin Jefferson to catch the freaking football? So it's like, okay, man, like, could Aaron Jones be fighting Addison for number 2 in the passing attack, or second on the team in targets this year?
That's a great point. And if it was mid-season and Hawkinson were to get injured, we'd be like, oh, uptick in Aaron Jones' passing game. But because he's coming in injured, we're not necessarily saying that. But it's true.
Yeah, very much so. All right, boys, let's get over to our next player here. I'm trying to forget who was next on the list here. Oh, we're going back to you, Steve. We're going over to a wide receiver now, guys. That wide receiver is T. Higgins, wide receiver 30 right now, overall 57. So, Steve, talk about T. Higgins for us. Why is he a comeback guy this year?
That wide receiver 30 is on Fantasy Pros.
Yeah, unless I'm mistaken.
No, hey, and look, it's 28 on Sleeper. I mean, that is low. That is his absolute floor, guys. And I guess the commonality in all 3 of my guys, they all got paid the offseason. T. Higgins is making 21 mil this year. Everything's fine with T. Higgins and the Bengals. All right, like, we're good. We've gotten over that bridge. And so even an underdog where he's a 4th round pick, it's a great value. What we have to understand right now about the Bengals is their personnel changed. The beat reporters are freaking out in Cincinnati. They're questioning offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher. They're saying that this is the biggest change that the offense has seen in years, the playbook. And really what happened was the personnel change. So they're seeing 12 personnel more on the field every day at practice, the beat reporters. So that's why they're freaking out. It's just Tyler Boyd is gone, and they really don't have other receivers. So Dan Pitcher, was asked, and he said it really depends on the wide receiver room. How often we're going to run 12 personnel. Well, if you look at our lads right now, you got Jermaine Burton, who's a rookie. He's speedster, and I think he's a good player. After that, Trent Irwin is right now they're listed as their slot receiver. You got Andre UC Vash, sorry. And you got Charlie Jones. I mean, the wide receiver room is telling the story. I think they're going to do a lot more 12 personnel, but we got a healthy Joe Burrow this year. And hopefully we get a healthy T. Higgins. Now, if he plays 17 games as opposed to those 12, I mean, there's no way he finishes at wide receiver 28. I think they're still going to pass 600 times. And I think he's just that alpha outside threat that he's always been. When they go 3 wide, I think Jamar Chase is going to go more into the slot at times. They want to move him around a little bit more. And then you'll still have T. Higgins being that dog that he is with a healthy Joe Burrow. I mean, you're really what's going on with the wide receiver 1s and 2s. There's going to be a closer gap this year. If you look at AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, I think that gap shrinks. I'm looking at the same for Jamar and T. Higgins this year.
I like it. Derek, how do you feel about T. Higgins?
I'm kind of at market right now, and I think the best case that I can make for T. Higgins, and I love all of Steve's points and stuff. It's not so much that I dislike T. Higgins. I'm just really, really high on Jermaine Burton. So I think that he can factor in heavily into this offense. I'm extremely high on Jamar Chase. He's my wide receiver 1 overall this year. I think Chase can go full legend Cooper Kupp, CD Lamb of last year type of mode. If he does that, none of us should be surprised. Because one of the biggest things that Steve brought up, I think Chase does go into the slot a ton. When they're in 11 personnel, they don't have a definitive slot wide receiver. T plays the outside. Jermaine Burton has been a boundary receiver. I think Chase is going to live in the slot this year when they go 3 wide. So am I saying Chase is going to get a 60% slot rate? No, but would I be surprised if he goes 50%, 55%? I really wouldn't be that surprised about it, considering how this offense is looking and what they've already done in previous iterations. So, I like T. Higgins. The best case scenario that I can give, or the reasons for him, is I think Cincinnati, one, I'm not high on Chase Brown. I am not high on Zach Moss. So should I be higher, and should everybody be higher on the passing attack? I think so. And Cincinnati, when Burrow was actually healthy and looking like Joe Burrow last year, we're discussing an offense that was 3rd in neutral passing rate last year. So volume is going to be through the freaking roof. And I'm not immensely high on Mike Gesicki. And, after those top 3 wide receivers, it's going to be consolidated, So I'm not seeing Mike Gesicki playing a high snap role. They're probably going to use some 12 personnel, but there's a lot of times where maybe if they're in 11, it might not be Gesicki out there running routes and stuff like that. It might be Drew Sample or Tanner Hudson. I think they could deploy a committee of those guys because, at this point of his career, we know tried and true Mike Gesicki can't block anybody. So how much is he going to play? So, I like T. I think the passing volume is the biggest thing that I can glom on to T. Higgins right now. And I think it's real. I think he's a fine target.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead. Sure, player.
Just real quick, his first 3 years, 108 targets, 110, 109. If he's healthy, even if he can get to 15 games, I'm saying he's exceeding that career high in targets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think definitively.
He could easily beat his ADP pretty easily. He's been doing it the last few years. I think he's tied to what Joe Burrow can bring us more. He's been solid. Like you said, Steve, the targets have been solid. They're not amazing, but they're solid targets for a strong wide receiver too. And if Joe Burrow can take another level where he has a a true MVP type of season, T. Higgins should be able to have a really great year out of him. And I think that's the key thing. As long as they don't focus too much on the run and they really do try to open up this passing attack where Joe Burrow is actually leading it, T. Higgins has prime opportunity to bounce back. And he's in a contract year. We all know that, people have, especially players, have chip on their shoulders trying to get paid one way or the other. I mean, he wants to prove that he's a wide receiver one for a different team. Obviously, he's probably auditioning for right now, and he needs to show it. He needs to be on the field and playing. And when he's on the field, he has high upside. It just needs to be on the field this year. And that passing attack needs to take another step in the development here. And without Tyler Boyd, another veteran presence, T. Higgins is that veteran now, and it could really work well for him in 24.
The other thing that I want to bring up real quick too is, and this has been discussed a little bit out on social, and I've factored this a little bit more into my thinking about this offense too. Can we honestly say this is probably assuming he's 100% back, which I don't think that there's anything out there saying he is not back from last year's wrist injury and stuff like that?
Right.
That this is the healthiest that Joe Burrow has been entering any training camp in his entire NFL career?
Yeah,
That's fair. Yeah. He's got the Luke Skywalker vibes right now. So he is on a mission. All right, let's get over to the next player here. Derek, this is your guy here. We're going to a wide receiver, not T. Higgins. I messed that up. It's Terry McLaurin, guys. Wide receiver 32, overall 60 player on the board here. So, Derek, why is Terry McLaurin a comeback player for you?
Because he's gonna, honestly, we've all made these jokes and talked about Allen Robinson in previous seasons and not getting good quarterback play, and finally a wide receiver getting good quarterback play. I think all of those things are true for Terry McLaurin this year. And if anybody's been listening to me out on the airwaves at all this entire offseason, pre-draft, all those things, I love Jaden Daniels. And that love for Jaden Daniels is going to spill over to his number one wide receiver. And just, I want people to understand how freaking terrible the quarterback play was last year for Washington. Like, Sam Howell is not good. When people talk about Geno Smith having to worry about Sam Howell, or Sam Howell might start... We watched very different quarterbacks last year. Like, you're telling me the guy that was 21st in CPOE, 25th in clean pocket pass rating last year, that's the guy we need to be worried about? That's the guy that was so great for Washington last year? No, he was a bad quarterback. And I think we also are so quick in all the recency bias about for and against players, very much so in the against mode of Terry McLaurin. Like, we had multiple iterations where we've seen big time flashes from him and the talent is real, but in multiple years he was dinged up and he would go on these monster runs, then get hurt and wouldn't be the same player, as well as add into that every year of his career horrible, terrible quarterback play. I think we don't give him enough respect for a player that, even if not just 2023, if you go right back to the very previous season of that, we're talking about a player that was 16th in yards per route run, 19th in first downs per route run, and now he's getting such a massive quarterback upgrade. The passing attack is going to run through him, and we know that Cliff is going to run an up-pace offense. So while the passing rate probably is somewhere around league average, the tempo is going to be there, and we are going to get a lot of plays. So quarterback play, talented as hell player, still in the prime of his career. I just look at this as a buying opportunity for Terry McLaurin. Like, wide receiver 3-ish, most redraft ranks, best ball, things like that. He easily could be a wide receiver 2 this year.
Yeah, no, I'm also really excited about Terry McLaurin, about him having a bounce back season, even somewhat of a breakout season this year. I mean, the quarterback situation, best quarterback of his career so far. Jaden Daniels, one of the best deep ball throwers in the class this past season in the nation here. You have a offensive coordinator mind that was like first in the nation in total yardage and offense. Like, it's a match made in heaven here. They didn't bring anyone in that's really gonna, mess with his downfield ability. I mean, you have Austin Eckler's going to take balls out of the backfield at times. You have Jahan Dotson, solid overall player. I don't know if the upside's there for him to take another step in that offense. Luke McCaffrey, I feel like he's more of like a slot player to me personally. So Terry McLaurin's going to have those downfield balls and downfield opportunities to make big plays there. And I think this is the year he breaks out from that 4 or 5 touchdowns, where he's seen 7, 8 this year. So I like the comeback for him to kind of bounce back to where he was more of that like mid-range wide receiver 2 than what he finished in 24. Steve, how do you feel about Terry McLaurin?
Absolutely. Yeah. What you guys are saying. And, it's very reasonable. He's a wide receiver too. And that's exactly what I think he is. He can finish in the high end, or, maybe his floor is the low end, but wide receiver 32. I think he where did he finish last year? 32. So he's being, and that really was it was a down year, even though they passed a shit ton in in Washington. I love Robbie talking about Brandon Ayuk maybe going to Washington. We've seen all the
good
pictures
Lord.
with Jalen Daniels.
Break the
I
internet
doubt that
today, please don't.
happens.
Hey man,
doubt that
well, obviously
happens.
if it did, look, Terry McLaurin, I think I'm more with Debro in that I think he's just a wide receiver too. You're getting him at a great value. If he gets that 7 or 8 touchdowns, which look, it's possible, I think that could be something where I think his volume is probably going to be right around where it's always been. But if he gets that outlier touchdown season, just because Daniels, adjust quickly, then hey, we could have a good season from McLaurin. You're just getting him at a great spot.
Yeah, no, definitely. Derek, we actually have a question for you in the chat from Luke on Twitter here, or X. What is McCaffrey's ceiling, bro?
That is a dangerous question, man. I love me some Luke McCaffrey. I think Luke McCaffrey's ceiling is extremely high. Like, I think he can turn into being a serviceable wide receiver 2 in the NFL. And I think we see that in much quicker order than people are going to give him credit for. Like, I've seen all the stuff out on social talking about Luke McCaffrey only got drafted because of his last name. And it's total bullshit, man. Like, we need to give respect to this kid. Like, his game and the evolution of his game is very, very real. And if you don't even want to believe me, like, go listen to like Jim Nagy talk about Luke McCaffrey and go look at the film. Go watch him play. Like, what he did for moving in from the quarterback position in a very, very short span of time over at Rice and becoming a real wide receiver, testing way better than I even thought he was ever going to test. And being a high volume player, like he earned a 28% target share in his final year at Rice. You don't do that if you're a freaking schmo. And I'm like, whatever. People could tell me, okay, well, it was Rice. Like, Luke McCaffrey is a player, if you would have taken him at a higher level of competition, he still would have played extremely freaking good. I think that people are underrating his game, still underrate his game. Like, my call for McCaffrey is, I think by the middle part of this season, I think he's going to be starting in 2 wide receiver sets over Jahan Dotson. This regime they have in place right now has any allegiances to Jahan Dotson. There is not a coach in that building that drafted Jahan Dotson in the first round. So all that draft capital stuff, new coaching staff, new front office, all that shit goes out the window, man. Especially when you've had 2 down seasons to open your career. So you got drafted in the first round. None of those coaches are still even there because, well, they sucked and they all got canned. So I don't really know, like, why we would not be even more in a Luke McCaffrey. And we talked about how consolidated this passing attack is, guys. Terry McLaurin, and I know just talked about this, I don't want him to get injured, and I'm not trying to put that out there. If he were to miss time, both short-term or significant time, who's going to step up as the wide receiver 1 in that offense? It's not Jahan Dotson. So, okay, then what? It's Dusty Zach Ertz. Oh, people don't believe in Ben Sinnott because he's going to split routes. Who else is there? I think Luke McCaffrey is that default guy for me. So I think his ceiling is a lot higher than people give it credit for.
No, I love that. I like the McCaffrey take there. Right, let's get over to the next question. Next slide here. I think we're back to you, Steve. One of my favorite players here, Jalen Waddle, wide receiver 16 and 28th overall here. So talk about why Jalen Waddle is going to be a bounce back player.
Yeah, it's really simple and real quick to answer Luke's question in the chat. It's neither Herbert or Johnson. It's DeAndre Swift is the starter for the Bears. But for Waddle, I mean, he finished as the wide receiver 33. So for me to call him as a bounce back, that's a very obvious pick. And he's being drafted as such. So wide receiver 16, you're getting him. If you want him, I think you're going to have to take him at a spot where you're going to be questioning players around him. I happen to like him a lot compared to the players around him. The wide receivers that you're getting in the back of the second round, I think that Waddle has the most upside. And really simply put, I just think that Tyreek Hill's season last year was amazing. And it really did mirror his first season with Miami in terms of targets. But we saw him slow down at the end of last year with injuries. I think you're not going to want to give him as much volume if you have a healthy Waddle. And we saw Waddle play, was it 14 games? And then he
Yes.
was in and out of like 3 or 4 other games. So he really didn't play a full season at all. He still finished as the wide receiver 33. And every time he was on the field, he was amazing for your team. You wanted him out there just about every time. It was very rare that he gave you a dud. Of course, the 4 touchdowns, that was the outlier for him. That's going to go up just naturally if he plays 14, 15 games. What they did in the personnel, I think it's maybe a little bit telling that they're going to spread it out more. And I think it actually is just affects Tyreek's maybe overall. I think everybody is putting Tyreek as like wide receiver 1 overall. A lot of people want that. It's really hard for me to get behind it if you really have to draft him as that wide receiver 1. I just think there's so much talent up there. And I'm not saying that Hill isn't a wide receiver 1. Still, he is. He's, if he finished outside the top 5, that would be very surprising. But with Waddle on the field, he's also an alpha out there. They went and got Odell, not really going to do much, but he is a player that they went out and got. Jonnu Smith, I think that's interesting. You actually add a tight end that can catch ball. Like, you had Durham Smythe last year as their tight end 1. I mean, so maybe Jonnu in this offense can actually be utilized a little bit. We saw him last year, still has juice. So what I'm saying there is I think that is helpful for Waddle. I think they're going to want to spread it out a little bit more. And I think Waddle comes back to that borderline wide receiver 1, and you're really getting him at a value in that case because I think that is his upside.
I like that. Derek, how do you feel about Jalen Waddle?
So we did an earlier show early this offseason with Joey P. Erickson and myself. And I voiced a lot of concerns for Waddle. But as we've gone throughout the offseason and I've had time to kind of let it marinate, I'm much more in on Waddle. I love that Stephen brought up the point of, he's banged up. I don't think a lot of people realize that he played 3 games where he was under 60% of the snaps. So, yes, okay, fine. He played whatever number of games. There was still more limitations to his game. But all of the efficiency metrics are there, man. Like, we're still talking about a wide receiver that was top 6 in both yards per route run and first downs per route run last year. It was just all of the high leverage usage, which really, helps to fuel not only do you have the talent to draw market share? We know Waddle has done that in various roles. Like when he entered the NFL, he was basically Miami's new Jarvis Landry, and he's since evolved or been put in a different role as playing an outside perimeter role, being a field stretcher at times. All of his high leverage usage last year dried up. He was outside the top 50 wide receivers in both deep targets and red zone targets. So as a player that when I first made my first pass through Jalen Waddle, and I was like, he finishes the wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game. If you had him in lineups and things like that, it sure as hell didn't feel like that. But every other usage metric and things that are reflective of talent and all of those things scream that, yes, Jalen Waddle is a guy to reinvest for 2024 because the talent is there, the efficiency is there. And the other thing I want to point out here is we saw so much of that touchdown equity go and get funneled through the running backs last year. If even part of that touchdown equity, because we know the running backs are still going to score and get theirs this year. But if some more of those touchdowns go back to the passing attack and it's not Tyreek Hill gobbling up all of that high leverage usage, which I think Miami's trying to tell us that, okay, we learned last year that Tyreek Hill is awesome. And we ran almost all of our passing attack through him. We cannot do that this year because if he's injured, if he's less than 100%, or if teams just say, look, fine, we'll take Tyreek away. What else are you going to do? We've seen by Miami's moves with the addition of Odell Beckham, with the addition of Jonnu Smith this offseason, that McDaniel's like, nah, man, we need to run more of this passing attack through other talented players. Yeah, I think Waddle's going to have a bounce back year, and I think is the upside, can he be a wide receiver 5? Probably not. Tua can't support 2 guys that are probably going to be somewhere in the top 5, top 6. Very few quarterbacks, if any, can do that. But can Jalen Waddle outperform his ADP and finish as, where we're talking about Miami at the end of the year has 2 wide receiver 1s in that offense? I think that's firmly possible. And to the chat's question here, I'm in on Jonnu too. I think that he could spike a lot of touchdowns. He's going way too late. I think McDaniel's going to love scheming him up into space. I'm not going to be surprised if Jonnu finishes as a tight end 1 in fantasy. And I think Tua, considering the consolidation of that offense, can support Hill as a wide receiver 1, Waddle as a wide receiver 1, and Jonnu, because that bar for TE1 is very low. It comes down to, can you get touchdowns in this offense? That can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jonnu Smith a lot. I know I caught him a little bit more of a boomer bust tight end this year. I think there's going to be games where he puts up big numbers for a tight end position there, but then there's going to be games where it kind of fades away because they do like to run the ball. Miami likes to run the ball. They really do. You've seen that this past season here. They're going to continue to use these wide receivers the best of their ability, but once these wide receivers either were banged up, they didn't really have a lot. So that's why they went out there and got some of these players that they could rely on for big plays. And what Miami likes to do is get a player that knows how to do something after the catch. And a lot of these players do know how to do that. And Jalen Waddle was a guy like 2 years ago who was 10th in yards after catch in 2022. And so allow him to be healthy, be on the field for 17 games. He's going to make noise in this offense here. And like I said, Debro, Steve, one of you guys said it, that the touchdowns are going to come back up a little bit for the passing game, where we're seeing maybe closer to 30 to 34 touchdowns, maybe, as long as Tua, can stay up on the field and everything. But, you should see a increase in passing touchdowns and reception touchdowns to these wide receivers here. And Jalen Waddle getting back to the norm where he showed us 2 years ago to some extent, it's going to come there. So Jalen Waddle is definitely a guy that should be on a comeback trail right now for fantasy. All right, we are going over to the next player here. And Derek, this is your guy here. We're going over to the tight end position here. Oh, damn it, I did it again. Kyle Pitts, tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. Tight end 6, 61 overall here. Debro, talk about Kyle Pitts.
I don't understand why he's still going in the same spot he was last year in drafts. I don't understand it, but it's happening, guys. And you want to talk about it, and I guess the theme of this part of this show is improved quarterback play. Like, what's not to like about the change for everything for Kyle Pitts? Like, new offensive coordinator, bye-bye Arthur Smith. So Kyle Pitts, who only got five red zone targets last year. I'm sorry. If you tell me that you schemed up an offense and Kyle Pitts only got 5 looks inside the red zone, I'm sorry, but your ass deserves to be fired. Like, that's sacrilegious. It's horrible. It's ridiculous. I don't understand why Arthur Smith felt the need to do that, but it happened. We have an improved quarterback room. Kirk Cousins he's going to be healthy, guys. And I think that, like, the Achilles, I'm not that worried about it. It's a pocket passer. It's not affecting, we're not expecting Kirk Cousins to be out there on boots throwing the freaking ball. He's going to get rid of the ball, and he's going to do it quickly. He's always been a pocket quarterback. That's not going to be any different in the year 2024. So a massively improved quarterback play from whatever metric you want to talk about. It's been horrible the last 2 years in Atlanta. So the bump for quarterback play, it should be real. And we're seeing that, like, Bijan Robinson goes where he goes in drafts. Drake London goes where he goes in drafts. And I disagree with none of that. I'm huge on Bijan Robinson. He could be the RB1 overall this year. Same with Drake London. He could be a top 5 wide receiver this year, and he deserves to be ranked as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. But why are we not also giving some extra love to Kyle Pitts? And we're going to say, oh, well, last year he did this. He didn't do that, whatever. Dude, it's Arthur Smith. That entire offense was shit canned by Arthur Smith last year. Kyle Pitts last year, and the metrics that I still care about, like, that I believe that forecast ceiling for fantasy tight ends. We know that, yes, the lifeblood of fantasy tight ends is the touchdowns, but also yards per route run against man coverage is one of the best indicators that I point to year after year after year. If you can beat man coverage on the outside, you can offer versatility, you're probably an incredible athlete, and you're really damn good at the position. Kyle Pitts, while all of his other metrics were down last year, Kyle Pitts last year was 7th in yards per route run against man coverage, right ahead of Travis Kelce. I mean, that tells me all I need to know. The man is going to dominate this year. It's going to be him and Drake London. And people are like, oh, well, what about Drake London? It's 2 guys. It's only 2 guys demanding the freaking ball. Like, they're both probably going to sniff 23 to 25% target shares. Maybe one of them ekes a little bit above that this year. Tell me what good NFL offense where there is just one guy standing alone on top and there's nobody else. It doesn't exist. So if you're using that as a reason, well, there's Drake London there, and I'm really in on Drake London. Okay, unless you think Drake London's getting 450 freaking targets this year, I don't give a shit. That's not a reason to be out on a player. Like, because what? There's two main pillars in an offense? Okay. Then why are you going to draft Devonta Smith? Why do you draft any other guy that's in an offense where there are two talented players? Don't draft Trey McBride. He's terrible then. Two pass catchers. Don't draft Marvin Harrison Jr. either. Top two pass catchers. Got to be out on him unless he's one guy just standing alone.
Oh, I get it. How do you feel about Luke's comment, Derek? They say took Kyle Pitts as a 3-3 in a Fantasy Pros FFPC team. Can't stop taking him early in the Hunter Henry League.
I'm fine with it. I mean, in a tight end premium format, like FFPC, I totally get it. Depending on, because the tight ends go high enough, it pushes some of the wide receivers down. As well as in that format, this isn't underdog we're talking about. So running backs do go a little bit higher and sparsed in between some of those picks. So you can make up at wide receiver later. Because if Pitts does the things that we think he can do, then tight end 1 overall is in the range of outcome. I'm not telling you that he's going to do that, but again, in that format, I mean, he's going to be producing if he does what we think he can do. If he does what we think he can do this year, he's going to be giving you wide receiver 2 type of production from the tight end position.
I like it. Coach Steve, number 2, how do you feel about Pitts?
Just call that man S2. Just call that man S2.
S2. Coach S2.
S1 and S2.
Come on.
Let's go. I mean, the theme is we're talking about wide receiver 1s, A's, and B's, right? I mean, I think we could be 1 A and B, Steve. You know, maybe we can live in that world.
I like that too. Okay.
Kyle Pitts, he's going to bounce back. He's going to bounce back from tight end 14. I mean, he had 90 targets. I'm sorry. And, you know, so for him to fall out of that tight end 1 conversation is pretty crazy. And like Debro mentioned, it's because of those 5 red zone targets. That has to go up. There's no way that doesn't go up this year. Now you have Kirk Cousins, who did support TJ Hawkinson last year before they both went down, and utilized him in the red zone and heavily targeted him. And like this situation, you know, you have that 1A and that 1B, and that's what you're going to walk into, just like he had with Jefferson and Hawkinson. So I really think that, you know, Kirk Cousins is a veteran. As long as he's on the field, he utilizes the tight end. There's no more Jonnu Smith. There's no more Arthur Smith. All the Smiths are gone. I think Pitts can finally be unleashed and be the player that we want him to be.
Do you want to hear the ultimate Max Payne stat last year for Kyle Pitts?
Say it.
So I talked about the 5 red zone targets. I'm going to give you another level of pain here with this. Over the final 11 games of last year, so weeks 7 through 18, Kyle Pitts got 1 red zone target. 1. Who hurt you, Arthur Smith? Who hurt you? It's ridiculous, man.
If I'm not mistaken, I think he has like 24 red zone targets in 3 years in the NFL. Like, this man is a big man here. Like, get this man the ball. But even so, like, you know, I feel like sometimes people put Kyle Pitts as like, oh, like they want him to be that trap. They want him to be Travis Kelce. Maybe he doesn't get there yet. Maybe he will get there one day where he's having 1,300 yards in a season here. But give the man 800 yards and 6 touchdowns at least. Like, that's a really great season for Kyle Pitts. Something that he hasn't combinedly done together. You know, he's got the yardage one season. He hasn't got the touchdowns yet. The touchdowns are going to come this year, whether we like it or not. They're going to use him a lot in the red zone here. He's a big target for Kirk Cousins. And even so, even if something happens to Kirk Cousins and it has to go to the rookie Michael Penix has a big arm. You put Kyle Pitts as a downfield threat there, he's going to make big plays on the offense, something that Desmond Ridder was not able to do for 2 years in that offense there for the Falcons there. So Kyle Pitts, like, the bounce back is going to come. And he's going kind of cheap compared to everyone else. Everyone else is in love with the, you know, Laporta, McBride, Kincaid right now, the year 2 tight ends. And Kyle Pitts is kind of just sitting back there. You get him in that, you know, that where we're in the 5th round, you'll be pretty happy because he's going to produce for your fantasy team this year, one way or the other. So Kyle Pitts is definitely going to bounce back into our good graces for a tight end 1 this year. Not just a tight end 1, top 7 tight end 1, hopefully in 2024. All right, so let's get over to two more comeback players here, starting with my first one of the night here. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback, New York Jets here. Quarterback 20, though. Much farther down the list than all the other players we've talked about. Overall, 119, so he's going in the later rounds of your redraft leagues, depending how deep you go with your bench there. And the big thing with Aaron Rodgers is that obviously he didn't play last year, really hurt to a lot of Jets fans or fantasy players who really wanted to draft him. But Aaron Rodgers is a key veteran that's going to be back on this field here. That with the Achilles injury, I'm not overly concerned. He did it week 1 of the NFL season. He's had the whole offseason to really recover and get back to normal. I mean, God forbid the Jets even made the playoffs. He probably would have tried to play. That's how willingness he wants to get back on the field. And he has a chip on his shoulder. He's trying to prove that he can win outside of Green Bay. He wants to be one of those quarterbacks that can do it in multiple cities here. And a city like New York is a great challenge for him. And he's going to come back. He has a great core around him. He's got great weapons. And, people look at last year wasn't good. Obviously, he did play. And then the year before, it was kind of a down year for Aaron Rodgers in a general sense. It wasn't Aaron Rodgers we've known. He had 12 interceptions last year. But look who he had around on his team there. His wide receiver 1 was Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard is like the wide receiver 4 now on the Jets, maybe wide receiver 5. I don't know. And then you had young players who were developing, who Aaron Rodgers hates, young players who just aren't there yet. Christian Watson was a raw prospect coming out who ended up having a really good season. Romeo Doubs was also a really young player. They didn't really have anything great at tight end. I mean, Robert Tonyan was coming off a bad year. They had a solid run game, but now he's with the Jets again, obviously. And he has a great chance here. He doesn't rely on his legs to do anything on the ground. It's all with his arm, and his arm didn't get hurt last year. Aaron Rodgers knows how to get the pass out very quickly off the ball there. He's got great weapons to do so. He's got weapons that can produce yards after the catch. Garrett Wilson, Corley is going to be a great guy who's going to be great after the catch. You dump the ball off the Breece Hall, the man can take it 80 yards very easily on any given play there. So Aaron Rodgers is a guy that you're obviously going to be able to draft late in your drafts unless someone is just so in love with Aaron Rodgers as the player and himself that you're going to be able to get him in the 14th, 13th round of your redraft leagues, probably even later in any sort of best ball draft, or if you're playing Superflex, you get him as your QB2 pretty easily probably, and he's going to bounce back and end up having a great season this year. I mean, easily probably get you well over 30 touchdowns, and he's probably going to bring those interceptions back down to where he was at that 5 and 6 range instead of 12. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to get that double-digit interceptions this coming season here. He's a smart player with much improved talent around him than he's had in the last 2 years. So how do y'all feel about Aaron Rodgers this year?
I like that you brought up that, as a QB2 in any super flex leagues, I mean, that's where I like him the most. And, if you just want to if you're hurting for QB and you're doing the scramble and you got Jacoby Brissett and Jarrett Stidham and Gardner Minshew, maybe throw a 2025 third round pick at Aaron Rodgers. And then, if he gets that upside, I think he is a back end QB1 if he stays healthy. It's really just about health right now. If he plays, a full 17, I think there's a good chance he can be in that back end QB1 conversation.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think low end QB1 is definitely a possibility for Rodgers. And again, I'm not considering how much recovery time he's had as well as the position he plays. I'm just not fretting these Achilles injuries with quarterbacks. This is not running back. This is not other explosive positions that we talk about where that type of burst is necessary, and, we get to the minutia of, which leg it is, plant foot and all that kind of stuff. Look, he's had enough time. I think he's going to be fine from the pocket. And the big thing is, can he, because we talked about this, he's not going to give you anything for rushing. So buying into Rodgers is buying into, can he get the touchdowns to be there? And that's what's always been, I mean, Rodgers and Russell Wilson have in previous years were always two guys where it was well, they can't keep producing these crazy passing touchdown rates, right? And they keep doing it, 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 and they keep doing it. I think Rodgers can reproduce that. It just that's really the crux of the argument. If you don't believe, if you think that the Jets offense could struggle, because it's legit. I look at their offense and say it's legit just Wilson and it's Breece Hall. And it's everybody else that can Rodgers elevate them around them. If you think okay, well, that skilled player, conundrum or soup that they have behind those two top players if you're not buying into that, or you think that Rodgers is at a point of his career where he can't elevate those players, then I can understand being down on him. But again, all of that risk and stuff like that is basically priced into where he goes in every single draft. So I like Rodgers a ton, like we talked about in Superflex, whether you're a compete team or you just need another quarterback, whether it's dynasty formats, redraft formats. If you wanted to wait on the quarterback position and say, build your team out and take like a high upside flyer on Jaden Daniels, even in one quarterback formats, and then back it up with Aaron Rodgers late. I think all of that totally makes sense to me.
And again, if anyone does have concerns with the injury, I understand I understand why people may have concerns, but it's there's not a history of quarterbacks getting Achilles tears, and the one that was really great, like Dan Marino back in 1993, torn Achilles week 3 or 4. I think it was week 6 of that season. He came back the next year, threw for 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns.
Can you imagine how far medicine has come in that last 20 years and a surgery like that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly. And he was in his, mid 30s almost. So it's not like he was too much younger than Aaron Rodgers at 40 years old. So give Aaron Rodgers some credit. He should do well for this season for fantasy. Hopefully the Jets don't do well, but that's a different story. So
I love how you snuck that in there.
I got to, as a Dolphins fan, I got to talk about how bad I hate the Jets. But let's get over to the last player of the night here. It's Chris Godwin, wide receiver for the Buccaneers. Wide receiver 33 overall, 62 overall among all positions here. And the one reason I like Chris Godwin to kind of bounce back this year is that, honestly, he had a decent season last year, 1,000 yards. That was great. Touchdowns have been pretty low the last few seasons here at this point, obviously. And now the team has back Baker Mayfield. They're going to be a little bit of a change on the offensive side of the ball here. But I think the big thing that it should work out this way where Chris Godwin kind of goes back in the slot a little bit more. The last 2 years prior to this past season, he was 4th and 8th in slot snaps. This past year, he was 26th in slot snaps. That's because they had Trey Palmer, who was a slot wide receiver and had a gun to go in that spot, which kind of forced Chris Godwin to kind of move off the outside a little bit. Now they have Jalen McMillan, a guy who plays the outside a little bit more, and it should allow Chris Godwin to kind of get back in the slot this coming season here, where he's thrived in fantasy football, where he wasn't the wide receiver 2 overall, back in 2018 when he was, but he's been a pretty solid wide receiver 2 for fantasy football. Someone who gets you 1,000 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns, and he should be able to kind of get back to that benchmark this coming season here. The offense might change a little bit where they're not throwing the ball to Rashad White, 80 times a game here. They're going to get these wide receivers more involved. Mike Evans is getting older, guys, so you got to take that into some consideration where if anything were to happen to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin's going to jump back up into a high-end wide receiver 2 potential with his ability that he's able to do on the field here. He is also in a contract situation, which I love to see in players who kind of on his last leg, he needs to produce this coming season to potentially get any kind of, real money this coming off season here. So Chris Godwin, I like him to kind of bounce back this year. I like that he's going to hopefully go back into the slot this year and be a player that, ends up with many games of double-digit fantasy points for some fantasy. So how do you guys feel about Chris Godwin?
I again like Godwin a lot for what he offers in Dynasty, where this guy was impossible to get on your team just 2 years ago. And now you can just kind of throw him in just add in Chris Godwin, and that. And then look, I think, if he's your flex in a Dynasty league, that's pretty good, especially PPR. Like you said, might get a little bit more slot work. So I think in a PPR situation, that's where he has an edge. Where I look at him in redraft, I don't see the upside. So, if it's somebody like a rookie like Ladd McConkey or Jordan Addison that Debro loves, I might pick that because I see the upside a little bit more. But I do like him as a throw in Dynasty.
Yeah, I don't dislike him a ton. I do find myself probably at market with Chris Godwin. I see the positives, and I do agree with the slot work, increasing because, last year just felt really weird. For all the great things that Canellis did, pushing Godwin outside, which Palmer in his collegiate career was primarily a boundary wide receiver. That marriage just felt kind of weird. Why they didn't put Godwin in the slot more, because when he was in the slot last year amongst, let me see here, 70 qualifying wide receivers, he still was immensely productive. We're talking about a wide receiver that was 21st in yards per route run from the inside. So if anything, like you saw more of a depressed season for most of it because they did push him to the boundary, and that's not been where he's primarily lived. And playing the big slot role, being the underneath weapon, and especially the other thing that we haven't discussed here yet is Tampa Bay's offensive line is still dog water. So getting the ball out of Baker Mayfield's hands, I think, is going to be very beneficial this year yet again, and putting Godwin in that underneath role is going to be much, much better because you're telling me Godwin and Evans were on the outside running routes last year. Your underneath slot option was Trey Palmer. Yeah, I'm sure Baker Mayfield was not looking to bail it out to him very often.
That's fair. That is fair. And he gets the targets too, like people don't think about it. It's like he has 125 targets each of the last 3 seasons here. Like, I mean, he's getting targeted on the field. Like, for where he's going, there's not too many receivers probably after him that are going to get 120 targets this coming season here. So he's going to get it pretty close to it. I don't see why they would go away from Chris Godwin. So use him while they can. So that's how I kind of see with Chris Godwin.
He's just in that range of drafts right now, or at least rankings and stuff like that, where it's like he's in that pick your flavor kind of spot of the draft, where it's like, would you want Chris Godwin versus like taking the upside on some other players, or do you want Chris Godwin versus like Deontay Johnson, or picking out like Tank Dell, like all these other guys? And it's like, I'm not saying he's the wrong answer. I'm just saying, like, I can understand where he's going in drafts and why, like, myself included, like, why I just haven't drafted him that much, because there's just a lot of other flavors of Kool-Aid that I like a little bit more.
That's fair. And I feel like the upside doesn't really show the upside that you want when it comes to Chris Godwin. Like, you see some of the other players going after him, like Jaden Reed's got a lot of upside that you like. Deontay Johnson with the targets he's going to potentially get in there. If Rishi Rice plays a whole season, people like that upside. Calvin Ridley, the upside of whatever he's offering us in Tennessee. Like, there's upside that people are showing, but like Chris Godwin's upside is just, it's more vanilla, unfortunately, but sometimes vanilla tastes very good on a cake. So it should hopefully be a good season for everyone. So, right. So I think we're going to finish things up here tonight, guys. Derek, my friend, you were a great guest as always. A lot of great insight here. If there's anything you want to say before we close up, I'll give you the floor, my friend.
Oh, man, thank y'all for having me, man. Definitely good times, good players talked about. I mean, I know when I got to the show sheet, I was like, oh, man, like y'all are just crushing it with these names, man. I had to kind of go outside the box a little bit. But no, thanks for having me, man. It was great talking ball. Anybody that's out there, look, if you're getting back into the redraft streets, all things best ball, all of our best ball kits are live on fantasypros.com. Redraft kit is live, fantasypros.com/kit. So check out all that. I've got eight plus articles in there. And again, my top 50 players is coming. I'm working on that as we speak. Got another 30 or 40 players left to write up, but it would be a full 150 with every player getting a full blurb and analysis on.
That's awesome. So please go check those out when they come out. And obviously Fantasy Pros is a fantastic website I love using quite frequently for my own self. So I love that. Coach S2, is that what we're calling you now? S2, is it SC2, whatever it is?
I threw it out there as a nickname. I don't know if it's gonna stick, but I just threw it out there. Okay.
S2, SA, or whatever you want to say. We'll come up. We'll figure it out. We'll workshop it. But Steve, anything you want to say?
I think it's good, man. Yeah, no, thanks to D-Bro for coming on the show. It was great talking ball, like you said, man. Always a pleasure. Back when the hot take days, I had you as a guest on many a time, so always a pleasure. Man. And then, of course, we got the Guillotine Leagues starting up. So we're going to be over at guillotineleagues.com. I'm going to give you rankings for position, depending on the week. Could be top 15 receivers, could be top 10 tight ends. And the Chop podcast, I heard from Paul Charchian that, could be coming soon. So just a little inkling.
Awesome. So obviously check that out as well. I love a good Guillotine League every year. Try to join one at least if I can. So, but of course, we thank you all for tuning in, whether you tuned in live tonight on our YouTube channel, The Fantasy Coaches, or over on X or on Facebook, wherever you guys are listening in, or if you're listening afterwards on Spotify or anywhere where you listen to your podcast. We obviously do very much appreciate it. We'll be back next Monday, same similar time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, getting into some different things here. I think we're going to talk about ADP next week. So tune in for that. So we appreciate y'all for listening. Tune in until next time, everyone. And you guys have a great one.
Back to back is not far-fetched. We got a couple of claws.